Yesterday, you told reporters off the
Our
Senate
colleagues
floor,
on both
Senator,
sides of the
They're
aisle.
together across the aisle.
This was a bipartisan effort.
This is not a party issue.
Hello, welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Leigh Caldwell, anchor at Washington Post Live and also co-author of the Early 202 newsletter. Today, we have another edition of Across the Aisle. I'm joined with Democratic Senator Martin Heinrich of New Mexico and Republican Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota, co-chairs of the Senate's AI Caucus. Thank you so much to both of you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
So I'm so excited to talk to you both today because it is a big week in the Senate on the issue of artificial intelligence. There is an AI forum tomorrow in the Senate. It is behind closed doors, but you have 24 of the biggest names in tech and labor and a whole swath of issues people who are focusing on artificial intelligence, including Bill Gates, you have Elon Musk, Zuckerberg of Meta. So Senator Heinrich, let me start with you. What is the point of this forum that is being held tomorrow, led by Senator Schumer?
Well, I think it's really a team effort between the four of us who've been working on these issues for some time now. And I think we all recognize that in this kind of a divided Congress, if we're going to legislate effectively on AI, it really has to be a bipartisan team effort. And so it's an effort to make sure that our colleagues are getting information directly from some of these leaders. And it's just one more example of that. There are going to be many more down the road, and we want to make sure that all of the folks who have a seat at the table, who have a stake in this, are heard by our colleagues, and that we have the best possible information to be able to legislate in this space.
Senator Rounds, you are going to be moderating the afternoon session of this forum tomorrow. All 100 senators are invited. Like I said, 24 of the biggest names in tech or around tech. So what issues are you going to focus on?
Well, it's really a matter of trying to get out as much information for everybody as we possibly can. We've got, as you say, we've got folks that are really into the AI, the machine learning and so forth, but to try to get the information that they have in a productive manner to as many members of Congress and their members of the Senate and their staffs as we possibly can. The Senate really is staff driven, and it's a matter of trying to get as many members as possible and to keep their interest during this time period. Senators aren't normally in a position to where they like just being told to. They like to ask questions and so forth. And unfortunately, because we've got such a large panel, it would be really tough to have all of them respond to 100 members asking questions. So we're kind of changing the format around a little bit to try to get these folks to share as much information as in a short period of time they think these decision makers might be interested in hearing.
Senator Rounds, I want to follow up with you. Your colleague, Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, a Republican, he told the New York Times that there's too much focus on these top executives, that Senator Schumer, others are placing too much of a priority on their opinions. Do you agree with that or disagree?
Well, I think everybody in the Senate is going to look at it from their own perspective. Some members may look back to their own states and say, I want to find out what's going on in my own state. Some of them might be doing this based upon which committees they have an interest in. I'm on Armed Services and I'm on the Intel Committee. So I've got a real interest in terms of what our military folks are saying and what the folks within our government talk about with regards to our capabilities for AI and what our adversaries are doing. That may very well be a direction of a number of other members, but I don't think there's anything wrong with getting as much information as possible from people that have been making their living and working on AI. So it's not just the top AI execs that we've got coming in. We've got folks from the screenwriters. We've got folks from the teachers. So we're trying to get this as broad-based as possible, but it'll never be perfect. But at least we'll try to get as much new information as possible in a bipartisan way out to as many people as possible. And doing it behind closed doors means that maybe some of these folks might be a little bit more candid than what they would be if it was open and available, where they would be, every word they say would be scrutinized.
You mentioned that you have the head of the Writers Guild. You also have the head of the Motion Picture Association. I'm asking this in jest, but actually, there's a little truth behind my question. Are you guys going to solve the Hollywood writers' strike tomorrow?
I'll
Well,
let Mark.
what I would say is that is something that needs to be resolved and resolved soon, because I will tell you, I have a lot of constituents who are not working right now because of this impasse. And, technology marches on, but we also have to be incredibly grateful and respectful of the work that goes into that industry. And right now, what I can tell you is a lot of my constituents are not working, and that's a very real concern of mine.
Yeah, I have some
You know,
family members who aren't either. Yeah, Senator Rounds, go ahead.
Let me add one item onto that, because Martin's right. Look, nobody wants to see strikes go on, but there is an item there. A lot of those folks are concerned that AI is their job. If
Yeah.
if we learn enough about what's going on, and if there's a way to identify and to be transparent about what's being created using AI capabilities versus what's come from basic pure human talent, that might be going a long ways and maybe allaying some of the concerns that many of the folks out there right now that use their own talent to make a living, that this might very well help them in their processes, or at least their concerns we might be able to address in language or legislation in the future.
Yeah, that's excellent point. As you mentioned, AI is central into the issues of the writers and the disconnect with the studios. Senator Heinrich, what specifically are you focused on the issue of AI? What do you think that the government needs to do most?
One of the questions that I'm asking myself is, where do we think, what's the threshold at which you begin to regulate something? There are going to be applications for AI that are very low risk, and we don't want to stifle innovation. But there are also going to be applications that have very real world consequences. And so if you're going to have a platform that is going to drive a car or be in charge of a physical system, we need to understand the risks involved there, and we need to be able to test those products and know with a great deal of certainty how they're going to behave. And so understanding, how we set those thresholds is going to be a fundamental question that I'm trying to get at.
I'm going to ask this question to both of you, but I'll start with Senator Rounds. I already mentioned Senator Hawley. He and his Democratic colleague, Senator Blumenthal, are coming out with a framework regarding artificial intelligence. There's lots of components to it, but I want to focus on one component. They, in their framework, create an independent regulator, one government regulator that oversees AI. There's some in the industry, including IBM. I've spoken with IBM before. They don't think that's necessary. They think that each agency already has the capacity to regulate their little silo of artificial intelligence. So there's a big difference of opinion here, one regulator or spread out across the government. Senator Rounds, where do you stand on that issue?
They're coming up with an interesting concept, but I think it kind of looks back at the way Senate is set up and the way the House is set up. We've got a Commerce Committee, we've got an Appropriations Committee, we've got a Judiciary Committee, we've got an Armed Services Committee, an Intel Committee, a Banking Committee. All of those areas, the folks develop expertise about specific items in their industry or in their profession. And I think we're probably going to end up, and if you take a note, we're not proposing, the small group of four of us that are helping to organize this info group. We're saying we want the committees to do the work, and the committees should come up with the ideas, because it really is a matter of how AI is integrated into their basic business activities that they normally would regulate. So I think there's probably a higher probability of having the individual committees actually doing the work and looking at legislation themselves and bringing their expertise into play. And I think most of the industries right now, they have a comfort level with the the regulatory aspects of either the organizations that independently regulate them, or looking at Congress writing laws based upon the committee's expertise. So in the Armed Services Committee, I know that we're concerned about making sure that we stay ahead of our competitors. I would suspect that Commerce wants to make darn sure that we have an outline that allows our country to stay ahead of our competitors as well. What we don't want to do is to regulate from a point of not having good information in the first place. And I think we keep as much of that expertise at the level where the industry and the regulators in that industry know as much about what AI might do, and trying to start out with a whole brand new board that specifically just works on the issue of AI. But time will tell. It'll a lot of it may after we finish out with some of these information sessions that we're doing right now.
Senator Heinrich, where do you think legislation will go? Do you think on this issue of a regulator, one regulator, many regulators, a board of regulators, like Senator Rounds just mentioned?
I don't disagree with Senator Rounds's characterization of this. What we have to recognize is that individual committees are going to have individual jurisdictions that touch this space, and we should recognize that and respect that. And at the same time, we also have to also realize that there are certain places in the U.S. government today that have had the capacity to be working in this space for a long time. The national labs are a great example of that, where they have deep expertise in exascale computing, and some of that is going to need to be brought to bear on this regulation question. At the end of the day, I don't think the national labs would be the place to necessarily regulate AI, but they'd be a great place to kick the tires and test these things and understand the models. So we're going to have to find a way to seam these things together that is respectful of the existing authorities and jurisdictions that already exist. And then we're going to have to figure out where the gaps are and try to plug those gaps. I mean, you were asking earlier around the Screenwriters Guild and the current strike that's going on. There are lots of gaps in our intellectual property law because 20 years ago, 100 years ago, as we were developing that body of law, people did not, this is not something people saw coming. And so we're going to have to figure out how we plug some of those holes.
Senator Rounds, I know this is very ambitious for Congress to do, to try to regulate around artificial intelligence. Congress has been unable to regulate privacy, which it has been trying to do for at least 5 years. This issue of related to privacy, but also social media and youth, another thing that they haven't been able to legislate. What makes this different? Do you think that this is going to be different this time around?
Well, if it would have been easy, it would have been done a long time ago. It's not easy, but we need to give it our best shot. Two parts. First of all, we recognize that if something or an action was wrong before the intervention of machine learning, it's still wrong today. And just because you have a machine in the middle of it doesn't absolve a human being someplace from being responsible for that wrongdoing. At the same time, with regard to privacy, if people have an expectation of privacy without the intervention of artificial intelligence or machine learning, they should still have that sense of privacy with AI being incorporated into a process. So I start with that basic premise. But along with that, we know that we're going to have challenges making a determination about how you keep privacy and about what data can be garnered and how it can be used and whether it can be amassed in such a fashion that individual privacy is not infringed upon. Those are going to be some of the challenges that we will face. But this isn't going to be new. AI is not something that just popped on us. It's just an issue that because of ChatGPT, more people are more aware of it. It's been used within military applications for years. It's been used within financial service applications for years. And, so it's something that is out there. I think we can handle it, but I think probably one of the most important things that we do here is if we can keep this on a bipartisan basis where we're talking reasonable people to reasonable people, I think there's a path forward. If it becomes partisan to where we're just at each other's throats, then we've got and we won't fix it. At the same time, I think a light hand on regulatory activities is probably better than a heavy hand. I want AI to develop here in the United States. I want us to be seen as the not only the birthplace for it, but we want to see as much new development coming into our country as we possibly can, but still provide for that privacy protection for individuals. It's not going to be easy, but we need to try.
And Senator Rounds, I just heard, unfortunately, you have to go. Something came up for you in your day job over in the Senate. Thank you so much for joining
Oh,
us. But Senator Heinrich, you are staying with me and you get to talk to just me for 15 minutes or 10 minutes. Thank you so much for staying around.
uh, sort of ruts that a lot of different issues find their way into. And so at this moment in time, at least, this is not a partisan conversation. So I actually think it's a good time to really be convening people and trying to find those places where we do have consensus. And if we can build consensus around a particular issue, we'll move forward with it. If we can't, then that's not going to be in the eventual package that we hope to put together.
Hmm. Um, so my colleague in the Washington Post is out with a column today about Sam Altman, who runs OpenAI, which of course is ChatGPT, saying that Sam Altman believed that ChatGPT and artificial intelligence should have been led by the government. And he goes on to say that at one point in 2017, there were some conversations with the administration or with people about money and about the government taking a lead role here, but those didn't go anywhere. So my question to you is, were you aware that this was a conversation, 5, 6 years ago? And second of all, should the government have been in the forefront of this industry rather than leaving it to independent private tech companies?
Well, I would say around that same time is when Rob Portman and I got founded the AI Caucus. And I can tell you that until ChatGPT became ubiquitously available, there were just lots of people in government who were not tracking this closely. So I'm not surprised that there wasn't more focus at the time, because those of us who were trying to create that focus were really challenged with all of the other issues that seemed a little more urgent to many of our colleagues at the time.
Hmm. Um, I have a question from the audience, Senator Heinrich. Andrew Stroud from California. He asks, one of the most significant legal issues facing the development of AI is the inability to copyright works generated through AI technology. Is Congress planning on addressing this issue through legislation? I think you touched on this, but
Yeah.
can you go into that a little
Well,
bit more?
I think generally we need to find the gaps in our existing intellectual property law, including around things like copyrights, and find ways to close those gaps. But it's going to depend very much on what committees can bring to bear that can get 60 votes on the floor of the Senate. And so I think we're pretty open-eyed right now that we don't know what the final product is going to look like. It's going to be driven by the individual committees. It's going to be driven by what items can we actually create consensus around. But certainly we're very aware of those gaps. And I think the more we can make all of our colleagues aware of those gaps, the more likely it is that we're going to be able to legislate in that space.
What do you think the timeline is for legislation?
I think it's ideally, I mean, we're working in this Congress, so I would like to have something that we can pass in this Congress. I think some people have said by the end of the year. I don't see things coming together that quickly, but I do think we could see a package in the following year.
And I have another question from the audience, actually. Cindy Walker from Nevada says, my home state, do you fear the overarching regulation Congress may put on AI development will impinge on the speedy development of important uses America is known for. And you guys touch on this a little bit too, not wanting to hamper uh, innovation. So, what is that fine line? Is it too early to tell?
Well, I think it's driven by where the consequences are, right? So the same responsibilities that we already have to make sure that people are safe, to make sure that their privacy is protected, we need to find that same balance with respect to artificial intelligence. And so, I very much am a believer that we can maintain our leadership worldwide in the space, continue to be at the forefront, and still respect the need to put some guardrails on this technology. That is particularly acute when you start putting this technology in a position of making decisions that have very real world consequences. When you put AI in charge of a self-driving car, that has real life consequences, right? Or it can. And the same is true if you were to say put an AI platform in charge of managing our electrical grid. So we just have to find the right threshold to make sure that we are putting those guardrails up, but not putting them up in applications that don't really have those same consequences.
There's a lot of doomsday scenarios with AI. That it is going to wipe out the workforce, that it's going to, take away so much responsibility and productivity of humans, where others believe that it's actually going to increase productivity and make humans' lives better. Where do you fall on that spectrum? And is that the role of government to ensure that an extreme of wiping out the need for humans doesn't happen? I know I was extreme in my description at the end there, but
Yeah.
where do you
Oh,
fall on that?
we're always going to need humans in the loop, in the equation, in the workforce. I think there are very real opportunities with artificial intelligence, but we also have to control for some of the edge cases that could be very extreme. And that's kind of why we're having this conversation tomorrow. And I think there will be some very pointed questions asked of some of the people in the leadership positions in this space of how we avoid some of those extreme consequences that people have articulated, while at the same time being able to use this like any other tool to uh, advance uh, the human species.
I interviewed Melinda Gates on this program, Washington Post Live, at the end of July. She told me that she has concerns about lack of diversity in the development of artificial intelligence, not only in the
Yep.
development of the software, but also how, without that diversity in the development, the impact of the software and the programming itself. Um, can Congress address that?
I think we should, because I think one of the things that many of us recognize is that if you don't control for the quality of data that you're training these systems on, then you're getting very efficient discrimination effectively. So like the data that goes in, just like in the old days of, uh, of writing computer code, there's a saying, garbage in, garbage out. We have to know that we're training systems on data that is not baking in things like bias and discrimination. And so I think her concerns are very valid, and that is one of the things that we're going to have to learn to control for. And it's going to be very different than the way we used to do it, where you could just look at the code and see the data. These systems behave very differently than that. So we're going to need testing infrastructure to be able to understand not only what answers that a system may come up with, but why they came up with that answer as well.
Great. And Senator, we only have time for one more question. I have to ask a news of the day question. And it is because House Speaker Kevin McCarthy just moments ago came out and said that he is launching a formal impeachment inquiry into President Biden. Um, first of all, what is your reaction to that? And second of all, do you worry that that is going to hurt electability of President Biden in 2024?
Honestly, in today's divided politics, it might actually help President Biden's electability. I think it'll be viewed largely as a political stunt. And I think we have such urgent need to just do our jobs and make sure that the government remains open right now. And we're seeing that happen on the Senate side. We're seeing very bipartisan appropriations bills passed. And yet on the House side, under Speaker McCarthy's leadership, I think it's a very open question. Will they be able to come up with a product? And I think it would be wise for Speaker McCarthy to focus on the challenges in his own body and really try to govern and show the American people that he can. And I think that's an open question.
Senator Heinrich, thank you so much for your time today. We are out of time having this very fascinating conversation about artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Good to join you. Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching. Check out all of our interviews we have coming up. Head to WashingtonPostLive.com. And until next time, I'll see you. Have a great day.